Hello and welcome to the Current Affairs Revision module, which is brought to you by Exams Hangout. In the previous video, we have given you some 25 most important current affairs topic for CLAT 2020, and in as most of you have asked to explain the topics which are given in that video, so we are going to cover some of the most important topics from the 25 most important current affairs which we have given in the previous video. And some of the topics which I have given in the earlier video are already covered in the previous videos. And the links to the same will be dropped down in the description so that you can go there and check out the remaining topics. So this will be a session of two or three parts, and this is the first part that we are bringing to you in this series. So let's look into the first topic. The first topic is daughter's right to inheritance. On the 11th of August, the Supreme Court has given a verdict which said that daughters have equal right to inherit ancestral property. And do remember, this is only on ancestral property. So what is ancestral property? That is something which is coming from the ancestors, and this does not apply to acquired property. Acquired property, that is something that is owned by the parent. So the one who has acquired the property has the rights to give it to someone or to succeed it to someone. But with respect to ancestral property, daughters have the equal rights to inherit. So this was a verdict given by the Supreme Court on 11th of August. So let's look into the background to this issue. If you look at the Hindu Succession Act of 1956, which talks about the inheritance of property, and the Hindu Succession Act of 1956 is framed upon the Mitakshara school of Hindu law. So basically, there are two broader schools of Hindu law. One is the Mitakshara school of Hindu law, and other is the Dayabhagya school of Hindu law. So based on the Mitakshara school of Hindu law, Section 6 was codified in the Hindu Succession Act of 1956. Section 6 said that only the male children are the legal heirs of the ancestral property. And this applies to only Hindu undivided joint family. Here, the word Hindu means Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, Jains, and the fellows who are following Arya Samaj and also the Brahmo Samaj. And this, the section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act of 1956 is in violation of the articles 14, 15 and 21, which are actually fundamental rights. It is depriving article 21, that is the right to life. So right to life and personal liberty, and right to life also, right to life doesn't mean mere animal existence. It means a right to live a decent life or to live a humane life. And it is also in violation of article 15, where article 15 prohibits discrimination or on certain grounds, and gender, religion, caste, place of birth are also such grounds. And 14 talks about equality, and section 6 says only the male children can be the legal heirs. Hence, this is in violation of all these three provisions of the fundamental rights which are envisaged in the Indian Constitution. So, since this is discriminatory, the Law Commission of India in its 174th report has recommended the Union Parliament to enact a legislation to amend the existing Section 6. So, to give effect to these recommendations, the Union Parliament has enacted an amendment in 2005. In 2005, Section 6 was amended and daughters were given equal rights to ancestral property. In legal terminology, they were called as co-partner by birth. So co-partner means equal birthright to ancestral property, which means by birth, the daughter or son will have the equal right to ancestral property. And this amendment came into effect from the 9th of September 2005. But what is the issue here? So the issue is in ambiguity in interpretation, because various high courts and Supreme Court has given differing views. In Prakash versus Pulvati, which is in 2016, the court held that only if the daughter and father are living as of 9th September 2005, then only this amendment will be applicable. The amendment to section 6 will be applicable, that is daughters can have equal right to inheritance. and this has actually prohibited retrospective effect. So what is retrospective? That is from before. So the amendment has came into effect from this September 9, 2005. That means even before September 9, 2005, this has to be in effect. That is called retrospective effect. And what is prospective? Prospective is from the 9th of September. That is from now. So retrospective effect was not given, and the condition of both daughter and father living as of 9th of September was laid down in the Prakash versus Fulvati case. Another case in Dhanamma versus Amar, the court held that this act will have retrospective effect. That means even before the 9th of September, this act will be applicable. That means daughters are co-partners even before the 9th of September 2005. Because of these differing views, the Supreme Court has constituted a three-judge bench headed by Justice Arun Mishra and consisting of Judges Abdul Nazir and M.R. Shah. In this case, the Supreme Court held that, so the case is Vinita Sharma versus Rakesh Sharma on August 11th, 2020. In this case, Supreme Court had held that daughters have the equal right to inheritance in ancestral property, and this was given retrospective effect. That is, before from the date before 2009, that is from the date on which Hindu Succession Act was enacted, that is from 1956, daughters will be co-partners. So this is the judgment which is delivered in the Vinita Sharma versus Rakesh Sharma, and this is all you need to know about the daughter's right to inheritance. And at the same time, you also need to look at the similar issues which are in the news. So this is the trend that Consortium of National Law Universities has followed. They tried to link the current affairs with the recent current affairs, with the related things. So the Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Marriage Act, that is the Triple Talaq Act. So try to look at that, and also Permanent Commission to Women into Indian Army. And some of the petitions were filed in the Supreme Court for entry of women into Sabrimala temple and also mosques. And these two things, that is the Muslim Women Protection of Rights and Permanent Commission to Indian Army, were discussed in the earlier videos, and the links to the same will be dropped in the description below. And next and the most interesting topic is the Pakistan's new political map. If you look, after the bifurcation of the state of Jammu and Kashmir into two union territories, India has brought a new map, and in May 2020, Nepal has brought its new political map, and recently our best friend Pakistan also brought its new political map. And on 5th of August, so very strategic day, on 5th of August, Pakistan released its new political map. So why on 5th of August? Because that is the date on which the state of Jammu and Kashmir was bifurcated into two union territories, and the special status to the state was nullified, or it was taken away. And the map included the entire areas of Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, Sar Creek and Junagadh. So all these territories are claimed by Pakistan, and they are also claimed by India. However, this is not new. Even in the map which was released in 2012, Pakistan has claimed all these territories. So what's new in the political map? If you look, as I discussed earlier, all these areas were included in Pakistan. This is not new. If you look at the map which was released by Pakistan in 2012, which is available in Survey of Pakistan, which is available in Survey of Pakistan.pk, there also all the territories were included. So that is the 2012 map, and the recent map also included the same territories. But the new thing which is there here is this one. Here Pakistan had said that the territory of Jammu and Kashmir is under the UNSC resolutions, or the United Nations Security Council resolution, which means that this is an internationally disputed territory. So that is the stand taken by Pakistan. So what is the stand of India? India is describing this as a bilateral issue. So this is a disputed territory between India and Pakistan. But Pakistan is trying to grab the international attention by claiming it to be a disputed international territory. So this is the only new thing about the Pakistan's new political map, and this map is taken from the Dawn newspaper from Pakistan. And if you want, you can look at the 2012 map which is available on Survey of Pakistan's .pk. And what's new? this map has renamed the Kashmiri Highway in Islamabad as Srinagar Highway. And the federally administered tribal areas, that is the FATA provinces, are included in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. So what is this FATA? If you look in India, we have the 5th schedule and the 6th schedule states. So they are given a greater degree of autonomy because of their ethnic culture. So similarly in Pakistan, we have these FATA provinces. Now they are included in the mainland Pakistan, that is in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. And this is not a new initiative. This was initiated at the time when Mr. Nawaz Sharif was a prime minister. And so what will happen when these FATA provinces are included in Pakistan? So the argument put forward by Pakistan is to ensure the development in the FATA provinces. And when FATA provinces are included in the mainland Pakistan, they will fall under the jurisdiction of Peshawar High Court and also the Supreme Court of Pakistan. So that's about this one. And some important facts which you should know. And I have a question here to you all. How many states and union territories in India share their boundaries with Pakistan? So answer in the comments below. And we have this POK. So what is this POK? POK is Pakistan occupied Kashmir, somewhere around here like this. So this entire area is occupied, or this is administered by Pakistan. And what is the capital of POK? That is Muzaffarabad. And who is the prime minister of Pakistan occupied Kashmir? Mr. Raja Farooq Haider. And the boundary line between Indian administered Kashmir and also Pakistan administered Kashmir. So this line is called the line of control. This line of control was demarcated through the Shimla Pact of 1972, and it is an internationally recognized boundary line. That's it. And next topic is about the sub-classification within SCs and STs. So before understanding this issue, let us understand who are SCs and who are STs. SCs, or scheduled caste, are the multiple sections of the Hindu community who were suppressed. Oh, there is some error here. So who were suppressed in the past. That means there are multiple sections which were suppressed before independence, and all these sections were brought together and named as scheduled castes. And what are these scheduled tribes? There are also multiple sections of the people who are living in the forest areas, and they are away from modernity. To include them into the Indian territory and to make them at par with the modern people, so we have included them in the scheduled tribes, and we are giving some special provisions to them as well. Now let us look how these SCs and STs are recognized. So these SCs and STs are recognized by the President of India. President of India will notify whether a particular community is SC or ST under Article 341 and 342. 341 is about scheduled caste and 342 is about scheduled tribes. And do remember, President can notify a scheduled caste or scheduled tribe only to a particular state, and that too with the consent of the governor of that particular state. Say for example, a certain community is recognized as a scheduled caste in Telangana, then that will be applicable only in Telangana state, and the same community may or may not be SC in the state of Gujarat. So the same is with the scheduled tribes as well. And any additions or removal, that means any amendment to the list notified by the President, can be done only by the Parliament. Parliament is the only competent authority to amend the list that is notified by the President of India. And as I stated earlier, this is applicable only to that state or union territories. A community which is SC in Gujarat may or may not be SC in the state of Madhya Pradesh. And do remember another most important point, that is part 3 of the Presidential Order 1950 stated that only Hindus, Buddhists and Sikhs can be SCs and STs. So Christians, Muslims, Parsis and other community people cannot be SCs and STs. Only Hindus, Buddhists and Sikhs can be SCs and STs. So that's about this. And what is the recent judgment? The recent judgment was delivered in the state of Punjab versus Davinder Singh. In state of Punjab versus Davinder Singh, let us go into the background what has happened. So Punjab and Haryana High Court has struck down the provisions giving first preference to Balmikis and Must-be 6 within SCs if available. So the Punjab and Haryana High Court has given a ruling in which the government has enacted a legislation. In that legislation, they gave some special preference to Balmikis and Must-be 6 within SCs. That means they are in the SC community, but within the SC community, these Balmikis and Must-be 6 are to be given first preference if they are available. So this was struck down by the Supreme Court in by stating the judgment that was given in the EV Chinnaya versus State of Andhra Pradesh, because in EV Chinnaya versus State of Andhra Pradesh, Supreme Court had held that only President has the power to notify the list and Parliament has the power to amend the same, but the state government here, the Punjab here it is a Punjab, state of Punjab. So states don't have the right to amend or notify any such list. Now, what is the recent judgment? In the recent judgment, a bench headed by Arun Mishra and consisting of judges Indira Banerjee, Vineet Sharan, M.R. Shah and Aniruddha Bose, they said that in a federal structure, the state government cannot be denied the power to make laws to give preferential treatment to subcategories within the reservation list, which means that states also have the power to notify or to prefer the first, or to ensure, okay, yeah, states also have the power to notify the preferences within the SC and ST list. So this is given in the state of Punjab versus Davinder Singh case. And the next topic is Arunachal Pradesh and the 6th schedule. So political parties and community groups are demanding 6th schedule status to Arunachal Pradesh, or to give special status that is given to the state of Nagaland under Article 371A. If you look, Arunachal Pradesh is a tribal dominant state and currently it is a 5th schedule state and it is asking for the 6th schedule. So what is the difference between 5th and 6th schedule? We'll look in the later slide, and we'll also look at what is the special status that is given to Nagaland under Article 371A, why Arunachal Pradesh is demanding for the same. So what is the special status to Nagaland and why Arunachal Pradesh is asking for the same? Article 371 capital A states that no act of parliament shall apply to the state of Nagaland in respect of the religious or social practices of the Nagas, its customary law and procedure, administration of civil and criminal justice involving decisions according to Naga customary law, and ownership and transfer of land and its resources. And these provisions shall apply to Nagaland only after the state assembly passes a resolution to do so. So these provisions are protecting the ethnicity of Nagas. So even Arunachal Pradesh wants its ethnic culture to be protected. So it is asking the union government to give special status that is given to Nagaland under Article 371A. Next, or it is asking even the 6th schedule status. So let us look at what is the difference between the 5th and 6th schedule. So both are tribal areas. So both these are tribal areas, but only difference between 5th and 6th is with respect to the autonomy given. If you look, the 5th schedule states are the scheduled areas in all states except Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram, whereas 6th schedule states are only Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram. And here they can appoint tribal advisory committee of not more than 20 members, and these committees don't have any legislative, political or financial powers. But whereas here there are autonomous districts, and each autonomous district is having regional council of 30 members, district councils of 30 members, and these district councils are assisted by regional councils, and they are given certain legislative, political and financial powers such as to assess and collect land revenue, because the Indian constitution says no tax shall be levied except by the authority of law, which means levying tax is definitely a legislative power and it is also a financial power, and at certain times they are given political and judicial powers as well. So that is the reason why Arunachal Pradesh is demanding 6th schedule status. Now I have a question. Arunachal Pradesh shares international boundary with how many countries? So answer it in the comments below. Yeah. Next and the last topic in this session is the PM Cares Fund and auditing. If you look after the COVID-19 pandemic, PM Cares Fund was set up, and recently, and many controversies started around the PM Cares Fund and its auditing. So recently, the Supreme Court said that being a public charitable trust, there is no need of auditing the PM Cares Fund by the CAG, that is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. And Supreme Court also refused to order the transfer of funds from PM Cares Fund to the National Disaster Response Fund. So a petition was filed to asking the transfer of the funds which are collected in the PM Cares Fund to the NDRF. So this was also rejected by the Supreme Court. So first let us understand what is PM Cares Fund. If you look in slot 3 of NLAT exam, this PM Cares Fund was asked. And PM Cares Fund is Prime Minister's Citizens Assistance and Relief in Emergency Situations. So do remember this. So this might be a question. And it is a public charitable fund with Prime Minister as its chairman. And who are the members of this? The Defense Minister, Finance Minister and the Home Minister. And companies can fulfill their CSR obligation. So what is CSR obligation? That is the corporate social responsibility obligations under PM Cares Fund. If you look, any company that is having a net worth of 500 crores or a turnover of 1000 crores or a profit of 5 crores, net profit of 5 crores, has to donate 2% of the profits to as a part of their corporate social responsibility under section 135 of the Companies Act of 2013. And the funds donated to PM Cares Fund are given tax exemption under section 80 clause G of the IT Act, and micro donations like 100 and 200 are also allowed. And what is the recent judgment of the Supreme Court with respect to the PM Cares Fund? The first point in the judgment which was given by the Supreme Court is no audit by the CAG, that is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. The Supreme Court ruled that while NDRF is audited by CAG according to the Disaster Management Act of 2005, and since PM Cares Fund is a public charitable trust, it need not be audited because it doesn't have any statutory obligation to be audited by CAG. However, the fund will be audited by an independent auditor. And other important point which was raised by the Supreme Court is there is no need to transfer of funds of the PM Cares to the National Disaster Response Fund. The court ruled that the PM Cares Fund is a charitable trust that is registered under the Registration Act of 1908, and the trust does not receive any budgetary support and or government money. So only the institutions which are receiving support from the government needs to be audited by CAG. So that is the assumption of the Supreme Court. And NDRF, which is formed under section 46 of the Disaster Management Act of 2005, were provided by central and state budgets. And other thing which was cited by the Supreme Court is that individuals can contribute to NDRF. That means there is no statutory provisions. That means nothing restricts individuals to make voluntary contributions to NDRF. So why should the funds donated to PM Cares Fund be transferred to NDRF? So that is a stand taken by the Supreme Court. So this brings me to the end of the part 1 of the most important current affairs revision module. Bye bye. See you all in the next session.